One credit bride from the Alien auction, but her voice changed everything. The asteroid station of Red Haven wasn't on any official chart. It hung at the farthest rim of Terran-controlled space like a tumor nobody dared to cut. Its docking bays reeked of spilled fuel and unwashed bodies. Its alleys hummed with black market dealings. Guns, slaves, organ-grown pets, alien relics. Everything here was for sale, and the only law was the weight of your own gun. The trade hall tonight was packed. A haze of recycled air and stimulant smoke blurred the hanging light strips. Roughneck miners, ex-soldiers, alien mercenaries, and outlawed scientists all pressed toward the center pit where the auction block stood. Women had been sold before, runaways, debt slaves, even alien concubines, but tonight's merchandise had stirred a strange buzz. A figure stood bound in the middle of the platform. A sack-like neural dampener covered her head, thick fabric laced with glimmering circuits, feeding into a clamp at her neck. Shackles locked her wrists together. Her frame looked human enough, slender, yet with a quiet resilience in the way she held her back straight, despite the jeering crowd. The auctioneer, a fat man with cybernetic eyes that gleamed red, raised his voice above the din. Lot 17. Property recovered from the rim. Wars. Female, prime age, functional. Silence guaranteed. Start and bid. 1 credit. Laughter rolled through the crowd. A single credit couldn't buy a shot of synth whiskey, much less a woman. She broken or just ugly, someone shouted. Bet it's a clone gone wrong. Probably diseased. That sack's there to keep her stench in. The auctioneer grinned, his metallic teeth catching the light. Gentlemen, don't be shy. She breathes, she works, she obeys. You want a field hand? A bed warmer? A lab rat? She's your blank slate. Still, nobody stepped forward. In Red Haven, appearances meant everything. No face meant no guarantee, no pleasure, no pride. Near the edge of the pit, Luke Thorne watched quietly, leaning against the rail. Dust from 100 planets clung to his duster coat, his boots scarred from long treks across barren worlds. He wasn't rich, wasn't famous, and didn't look for trouble. Yet trouble had a way of circling back to him. His last job, running ore shipments past Dominion patrols, had ended in blood and fire. He had come here to disappear, not to buy anything. But the sight of the woman on the block pulled at him in a way he couldn't explain. She didn't cower, didn't tremble like most slaves did. Her stillness was different, tense, waiting, as though she was holding herself back from something. The crowd grew restless. The auctioneer slammed his cane against the block. No bids? Fine. She goes back to the pens, stripped and sold for parts. Something in Luke tightened. He didn't care for slaves, never had. But the idea of her being torn down for scrap stirred something primal inside him. Before he could think twice, his voice cut through the noise. 1 credit. The hall went silent. Every head turned. The auctioneer blinked, then smirked. Sold. To the man with more mercy than sense. Laughter erupted, but Luke ignored it. He pushed forward, dropped a tarnished coin into the auctioneer's stand, and stepped up. With a sharp gesture, he unlatched the shackles from the woman's wrists. Her hands fell free, pale skin marred with faint scars. He slid a blade across the rope, binding her arms, then jerked her forward. The crowd muttered, confused. No one bought a slave just to unbind her. Take her, cowboy, someone jeered. Let's see that face you paid for. Luke didn't oblige them. He placed a hand on her shoulder, steady but not harsh, and guided her down from the block. The sack stayed on. She moved stiffly, but her steps were controlled, purposeful. The crowd parted as he led her toward the docking bay. Whispers followed them like shadows. The corridors of Red Haven were narrow and damp, pipes hissing overhead. Luke said nothing. Neither did she. The only sound was the echo of their boots on rusted steel. When they reached his small freighter, the Ash Rider, he keyed the hatch open and ushered her inside. The air smelled faintly of oil and recycled water, cleaner than the stench of the station. He turned to face her. You can sit, or don't. I'm not your master. She tilted her head slightly beneath the sack. The faintest breath escaped her, like a sound caught between disbelief and relief. Luke grabbed a ration pack from the shelf, tore it open, and placed it on the table between them. Eat, if you want. Her hands hovered over the food for a moment before pulling back. Silence stretched. You don't talk? He asked. A pause. Then soft and low, a voice emerged from under the sack. Not often. Her tone was strange, delicate but edged, as though unused for too long. It rolled through the cabin like smoke, unsettling and oddly intoxicating. Luke forced himself to look away, busying with the ship's controls. Fair enough. Outside the viewport, Red Haven shrank into the void. Stars wheeled like scattered ash across black space. For hours, neither spoke. He piloted. She sat still, hands folded, her breathing steady but shallow. Then the sensors blinked red. A vessel detached from the station, sleek, armored, its engines burning like knives through the dark. A mercenary ship. Luke cursed under his breath. Of course, nothing came cheap on Red Haven, not even a one-credit woman. They're following, he muttered. The sack shifted slightly, as if she were listening more intently now. He gripped the throttle. Strap in. It's gonna get rough. The mercenaries closed fast, weapons charging. Luke swung the Ash Rider into a sharp dive between asteroid fragments, pushing the engines to their limit. Plasma fire lanced past the hull, lighting the cockpit in brief flashes. He cursed again, jerking the ship hard. Why the hell are they chasing us? You worth more than a credit to them? For the first time, he heard a sound from her that wasn't silence. A soft, unsettling laugh. More, she whispered. Luke glanced at her, pulse quickening. Beneath the sack, something about the way she sat, still calm, almost expectant, made his skin prickle. The mercenary ship loomed on the scanner. They fired again, a direct hit grazing the rear shields. Sparks showered the cabin. Luke snapped the yoke, forcing the freighter into a spiral dive. Hold on! Then it happened. The woman moved. Her shackled hands lifted, fingers twitching as though pulling invisible threads. The air in the cabin vibrated, a pressure building in Luke's chest. Outside, the pursuing ship staggered, its weapons flickering. Luke's eyes widened. What the? The enemy vessel suddenly veered off course, colliding with an asteroid. A bloom of fire erupted, fragments scattering across the void. The cabin went silent again, save for Luke's ragged breathing. He turned to her slowly. She lowered her hands, still bound but trembling. Beneath the sack, her voice was steady, almost cold. They won't stop coming. Luke swallowed hard, staring at her. For one credit, he had bought far more than a woman. He had bought a storm. And deep inside, against his better judgment, he felt the first dangerous flicker of desire. The freighter Ash Rider drifted beyond the asteroid field, engines pulsing low. Inside, the silence between Luke and the veiled woman pressed heavy. The aftershock of what she'd done still clung to the air. He had flown through firefights, faced Dominion patrols, even seen warships collapse in burning orbit. But never had he watched someone twist a ship's fate with nothing but emotion of their hands. She sat across from him, head lowered beneath the sack, her wrists still bound with the unlocked but unremoved cuffs. For hours she had been motionless, not cowering, simply waiting. Luke finally broke the silence. You gonna tell me what that was back there? No answer. Just a soft exhale. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. Fine, don't talk, but I need to know if more of them are coming. This time her voice came low and steady. Yes. He froze. That one word curled like smoke in the cabin. Not a warning, more a certainty, the way someone might announce the rising of a sun. Luke's eyes narrowed. And why's that? Her head tilted slightly. Because I don't belong to them anymore. And they want me back. The words carried weight, heavy with implication. Luke resisted the urge to press further. He had learned long ago that people who carried scars rarely gave you their truths all at once. He shifted in his seat, focusing on the scanners. The board glowed with signals, merchant convoys, drifting debris, the faint hum of Dominion patrol routes. Red Haven lay shrinking behind them, but danger lingered close. He set a course for the outer wastes, a region of fractured moons and dead planets that no sane trader crossed unless desperate. Navigation was hellish, but it was where he could vanish. The engines groaned as he engaged the jump. The stars stretched, warped, and then snapped back into darkness scattered with jagged planetary remains. The wastes lived up to their name. Broken moons drifted like jagged teeth, some glowing faintly with volcanic fire. Shattered rings hung in the void, glittering with ice and metal. The ship rattled as Luke maneuvered through the labyrinth. Behind him, he heard the faint rustle of movement. The woman had shifted, leaning forward, hands resting on the table. For the first time, she looked less like a prisoner and more like someone waiting to be acknowledged. Luke set the ship on autopilot, then turned. "Look, you don't owe me anything, but if people are chasing you, I need to know what I just bought into." Her head lifted, and though the sack still hit her face, he felt her eyes on him. "You didn't buy me." The words struck harder than he expected. "I bought you out of there," he corrected, voice tight. Her reply was quiet, but edged. "That is different." For a moment, they simply stared at each other, one with a face shadowed, the other with eyes narrowing. Something in her tone challenged him, pushed against the roles Red Haven had forced them into. Luke finally exhaled. "Fine, I didn't buy you, but I stuck my neck out, and right now I've got mercs on my tail. So you could at least tell me your name." The pause stretched long, then softly, "Willa." It felt strange on her lips, as though she hadn't spoken it in years. Luke tasted it silently in his mind before answering. "Luke," he said simply. Something shifted between them in that moment. Not trust, not yet, but a recognition. The ship jolted as an alarm blared. The scanner lit up. 3 signatures inbound, fast, mercs again. Luke cursed. "Guess you were right." He slammed the throttle, weaving the ash rider between tumbling rock. Plasma bolts streaked past, exploding against the debris. He strapped himself in, barking toward her. "Hold on!" But when he glanced back, Willa wasn't holding on. Her fingers flexed, wrists trembling with energy. The cuffs rattled faintly. Luke shouted over the rumble of the engines. "Don't! Whatever you did before, it nearly fried my systems. I need this ship intact." Her voice came sharp, more forceful now. "Then fly better." It jolted him. Not just the words, but the strength behind them. The merc ships closed in, sleek predators against his battered freighter. Luke dove through a cluster of ice shards, hulls scraping dangerously close. One merc overshot and collided, bursting into fire. The other 2 tightened their formation. Luke snarled, "Damn it, they're hurting us." Willa's voice cut through the chaos. "Open the cargo bay." He whipped around. "What?" "Do it." Something in her tone, steady, commanding, made his gut twist. Against every instinct, he hit the release. The bay doors opened, venting crates and scrap into the void. The mercs adjusted, expecting debris. But then Willa stood, cuffs clattering, and raised her hands. Luke's hair prickled as the air thickened. The floating debris outside suddenly shifted, pulling into a spiral. Shards of ice and metal whirling like a storm. The merc ships fired, but the storm swallowed the bolts, scattering them harmlessly. Then the debris slammed forward in a torrent, smashing into the merc vessels. One went dark instantly, the other spun out, trailing fire. Luke yanked the controls, dragging Ash Rider out of the storm before it swallowed them too. He sealed the bay, chest heaving. When he turned, Willa had collapsed into the chair, trembling. Her voice was a whisper. "They won't stop." Luke's pulse thundered. He should have been furious. She'd nearly gotten them killed. But instead, watching her shoulders rise and fall, Hearing that voice, he felt a dangerous mix of awe and something deeper. Desire. Not the crude kind he'd heard in the jeers back at Red Haven. This was sharper, heavier. It wasn't just her body, veiled and scarred. It was the sheer force of will she carried. He stood, crossing the cabin, crouching beside her. Then we'll make them regret chasing us. For the first time, she turned toward him fully. The sack hid her features, but he felt the heat of her breath close, the trembling of exhaustion and fire. Luke's hand hovered, almost reaching for the fabric at her throat, almost pulling the sack away, but he stopped himself. Her voice came again, low and shivering. Not yet. Their closeness burned. He wanted to see, wanted to know, but he drew back, forcing control. Fine, he muttered, standing. Not yet, but soon. Hours later, the ship cruised in quieter space, drifting between the wreckage of forgotten satellites. Luke sat at the console, fingers drumming. Behind him, he heard her breathing, slow and even now. Sleeping, maybe. He glanced back once. The sack still covered her head, but the way her body curled against the seat, the faint rise and fall of her chest, it stirred something dangerous in him. He forced his eyes back to the stars. Tomorrow, more ships would come. Tomorrow, answers would need to be forced. But tonight, all he could think of was the voice beneath that sack and the way it had already begun to own him. The ash rider drifted on silent engines through the wastes, a lone spark of life between dead moons. Hours had passed since the last skirmish. Luke sat at the pilot's console, boots propped up, staring at the endless scatter of stars. His hands drummed restlessly on the armrest, but his mind was elsewhere, back in the cargo bay, watching debris whirl into a storm, watching mercenary ships shatter under her command. No human did that. Not without tech, not without augmentation. Yet she had done it with nothing but will. Behind him, she was quiet again, resting. That sack still cloaked her identity, that veil of mystery more suffocating with each passing hour. Every time she spoke, every syllable was like flint on dry tinder inside him. At last, he pushed from his chair. He couldn't sit still any longer. He found her in the galley, sitting with her back straight, hands clasped loosely in her lap. The dim light traced the fabric that hid her face, giving her an almost ghostly silhouette. "You're going to have to tell me more," Luke said. His voice carried a note he rarely used. Less demand, more plea. She didn't flinch. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," he admitted. Silence stretched. Then with deliberate slowness, she raised her hands to the clasp at her throat. Luke's breath hitched. The metallic lock clicked. The circuits lining the sack dimmed. Fabric loosened. She pulled it free. The sack slid away, revealing her face at last. Luke had braced himself for horror. Disease, deformity, the kind of brokenness that made men at the auction jeer. But what he saw left him shaken in a different way. Her features were sharp, almost delicate, cheekbones high, lips full, eyes luminous in the low light, but scars traced across her skin like fine lightning, glimmering faintly with alien circuitry. One ran from her temple to her jaw, another curled along her collarbone, disappearing beneath her shirt. The marks weren't grotesque, they were mesmerizing, a blend of human fragility and alien craftsmanship. Luke found himself staring, torn between awe and an ache he couldn't name. Willa held his gaze unflinching. "Now you know why they want me." His throat was dry. "What are you?" Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "Wrong. Try me." She drew a slow breath. "I was born on a frontier colony. My mother human, my father not. Dominion scientists called it research. They took me, broke me down, built me back. Half blood, half machine, never enough of either." Her hand traced one scar absently. "When I escaped, they branded me dangerous, a thing to be contained. So I was sold instead." Luke's fist clenched at his sides. He'd heard rumors of hybrid projects, children stolen, altered, then discarded when they weren't perfect. Seeing the living proof sitting across from him made his blood run hot. They used you, he muttered. They made me. Her voice carried no self-pity, only the hard edge of survival. She leaned forward, eyes locking with his. Do you regret buying me now? The question cut deep. The truth rose before he could stop it. No. Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across her features. For the first time since he'd met her, she seemed uncertain. Luke forced himself to breathe. Those men back there, they didn't see you, just property. I saw someone who refused to break. A shiver passed through her, faint but visible. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them thickened, charged, dangerous. Willa's eyes softened, voice quieter. Most turn away when they see the scars. Luke stepped closer, slow, deliberate. Then most are fools. She didn't move as he reached up, fingers brushing lightly along one jagged mark on her cheek. Her skin was warm, alive, humming faintly with the pulse of the circuitry beneath. Her breath caught. So did his. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. He had meant only to prove a point, to show her she wasn't a monster. But the contact lit something raw inside both of them. Her hand rose, resting against his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heart. Why? She whispered. Luke's voice was rough. Because you're not broken. You're still here. For a heartbeat, they stood frozen. Hunter and hunted, survivor and survivor, teetering on the edge of something neither could name. Then the moment snapped. The ship's alarm blared. Sensors lit up red. Incoming vessels. 5 this time. Luke cursed under his breath, pulling back. They found us. Willa straightened instantly, scars glinting. They won't stop. Her voice was steady, but beneath it he heard the tremor, the fatigue of someone who had run too long, fought too hard. Luke grabbed his rifle from the rack, shoving a charge into the chamber. Then we hit them first. She stood beside him, no longer veiled, scars glowing faintly like war paint, and though her eyes burned with defiance, he caught the flicker of something else too. Trust, fragile but real. The ambush came fast. The mercenary ships swept in, weapons blazing. Luke threw the Ash Rider into evasive maneuvers, hull groaning under the strain. Willa braced herself at the console, fingers moving with startling precision. She rerouted power, locked onto targeting relays, her hybrid senses feeding directly into the ship's systems. Together they moved as one. Luke's grit on the controls, Willa's sharp mind bending tech to her will. Plasma bolts streaked past. One slammed into the aft shields, rattling the cabin. Luke gritted his teeth. We can't outrun all of them. Willa's voice cut sharp. Then we don't. Her eyes glowed faintly now, circuitry flaring beneath her skin. She tapped a sequence Luke didn't recognize, overriding his systems. The ship's external lights flared, then burst outward in a dazzling shock wave of electromagnetic force. The nearest Merc vessel spun out, its systems fried. Another collided with drifting rock, detonating in flame. Luke fought the controls, forcing Ash Riders clear of the blast. When the storm faded, 2 enemy ships remained, circling, cautious now. Luke glanced at Willa. She was pale, sweat dripping down her temple, but her eyes burned bright. Still think you're wrong? He muttered. She met his gaze, lips curving faintly. Always. The last 2 ships retreated, vanishing into the dark. For now, they were safe. Luke sagged against the console, exhaling hard. His heart still thundered, not from the fight, but from the nearness of her, the way scars glowed against her skin, the way her voice lingered in his chest. Willa lowered herself into the seat, trembling. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again to find him watching. Luke. Her voice was softer now, almost fragile. If you stay with me, they'll never stop coming. You'll die for me. He stepped closer, crouching in front of her. Or I'll live because of you. Her breath caught again, the line between fear and desire blurring dangerously. This time she didn't pull back when he reached for her hand. And though alarms still glowed faintly on the console for one stolen moment in the waste, the hunted woman and the one-credit cowboy found something fiercer than survival. Something that made both of them want to keep fighting, no matter the cost. The night sky above Fort Zenith burned in streaks of violet light, the same strange hue that came whenever the alien war machines warped in and out of local space. The once quiet frontier outpost had become a battlefield of clashing energies, trembling under the constant boom of heavy cannons. From the high cliffs, Luke Thatcher pulled Willa behind a shattered defense turret as a plasma bolt scorched past them, melting rock into glowing slag. Her breath came sharp, fast. She wasn't the same woman who had once stood on an auction block with a sack over her head. That Willa had been voiceless, bent under chains of shame. This Willa had fire in her eyes, a stolen pulse rifle in her hands, and a fury that made even seasoned soldiers glance twice. But tonight, the stakes were crueler than either of them imagined. Luke scanned the battlefield below with cold calculation. "That's not a raid," he muttered, voice low. "That's a full-scale purge." Willa followed his gaze. Dozens of Zeroth bioconstructs, sleek insectal giants with blade limbs glinting, were cutting through human defenders. The defensive lines wavered, falling back yard by yard. What unsettled Willa wasn't the violence. It was the figures leading the charge. Humans, clad in black exosuits carrying weapons to advance for the frontier, they fought alongside the alien monsters. And at the center of them, tall and unmistakable, stood a man with a scar across his jaw. Colonel Varen, the officer who had once promised Luke sanctuary. Luke's jaw tightened. The bastards sold us out. Willa's gut twisted. She remembered the moment earlier, when Varen had smiled too easily, had clasped Luke's hand a little too firmly. She should have trusted her instinct. Something in his eyes had been too hungry. Now it was clear. Varen hadn't just betrayed them. He had traded humanity's survival for personal power. The assault hit closer. A detachment of armored soldiers surged up the ridge, cutting off their path back to the shuttle bay. Plasma flares lit the rocks in hellish glow. Luke pulled Willa close, shielding her body with his as the blast rained down. "Stay with me. Whatever happens, stay alive." But she shoved his arm aside, her voice sharp as steel. "No, Luke, I'm done hiding. If we run now, we die anyway." Something in her tone, defiance, hunger, the raw edge of lust braided with adrenaline, ignited him. He had seen Willa's strength in whispers before. Tonight it roared, untamed. Together they rose from cover, weapons blazing. Luke's old repeater rifle spat red streaks of iron-tipped bullets, tearing through the enemy's front rank. Willa's stolen pulse rifle hummed with lethal rhythm, every shot precise, efficient. The shock of their counterattack forced the black armored soldiers to scatter, giving them a few precious moments. But the Zeroth constructs didn't scatter. They advanced with terrifying calm. One leapt, claws slicing toward Willa's throat. She ducked, rolled, and fired point-blank into its abdomen. The creature screeched, half liquid inside, spraying luminescent gore across her arms. She hissed, wiping her face, rage blending with exhilaration. Luke grabbed her wrist. "We need cover, now!" They dove into a fissure in the rock, barely wide enough for two. Enemy fire scorched the entrance, lighting the narrow crack in violent flashes. They pressed close, chest to chest, sweat mixing with grime. The danger, the nearness, the heat of survival pressed on them like gravity itself. Her lips hovered near his ear. "If we're dying tonight, I won't go without knowing what this is." Her fingers slid against his jaw, trembling yet firm. For a moment, war receded. Their breasts became the battlefield. Luke kissed her, raw and desperate, and she met him with hunger that left no air between them. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't soft, it was survival made flesh, a lust that declared they were still alive despite a universe trying to crush them. The roar outside yanked them back. Willa broke away first, panting, her eyes burning. "Later, after we burn through these traitors." Luke grinned through blood on his lip. That's the woman I paid $1 for. They burst from the fissure together, weapons howling. The ridge became a storm. Explosions tore craters in the ground. Xeroth shrieked as bodies fell smoking. Soldiers cursed as the cowboy and the woman they dismissed carved a bloody path through their ranks. Then the ground shook. Varen descended the slope in his black exosuit, glowing veins of alien circuitry crawling across its armor. His visor peeled back, revealing a smirk. Luke Thatcher, you always did have a habit of rescuing lost causes. His eyes flicked to Willa. And this must be the infamous Sack Girl. The Xeroth want her alive. You brought me exactly what I needed. Luke leveled his rifle. You're nothing but a hound in their leash. Varen chuckled, spreading his arms as if welcoming fire. I'm the future. Do you think Earth will survive without evolving? Without kneeling? Willa stepped forward before Luke could stop her. The light caught the scar across her cheek, the one she had once hidden. Now it glinted like a badge. I've knelt before men like you my whole life. Never again. Varen's smile thinned. With a gesture, his soldiers advanced. The next moments blurred in chaos. Luke hurled a frag charge, detonating a cluster of enemies. Willa rolled between plasma bolts, gunning down another squad. But Varen moved with monstrous power, his exosuit shrugging off bullets, his fists crushing stone. He lunged, striking Luke with bone-shattering force. Luke slammed against the rocks, vision fracturing. Pain ripped through his ribs. Willa screamed his name, fury boiling into her veins. She leapt onto Varen's back, clawing at the circuits of his armor, jamming her pulse rifle against the glowing seams. He roared, thrashing, but she clung like fire itself. You'll never own me again! She fired. The rifle discharged point blank into the exosuit's core. Energy flared, searing her arms, throwing her backward. The explosion ripped Varen's armor open in a burst of molten light. But he didn't fall. He staggered, burned and bleeding, yet still alive, eyes wide with madness. You little... A single gunshot cut his words. Luke, battered but standing, had fired his last round straight through Varen's skull. The traitor collapsed. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. Then the Xeroth shrieked, enraged at the loss of their human pawn. The battlefield roared anew. Willa crawled to Luke, hauling him upright, ignoring the blood on his side. We have to move, now! Together they staggered toward the inner cliffs, deeper into enemy territory. But there was no choice. Forward was survival. Behind them was only death. Above, the alien sky split open, more Xeroth descending in cascades of violet light. And Willa knew this was only the beginning of their fight. The cliffs bled violet light as the Xeroth descended in endless waves, their screeches echoing against the stone like knives against steel. Fort Zenith burned behind Luke Thatcher and Willa, black smoke twisting into the star-choked sky. Ahead, jagged valleys stretched toward the ancient mining tunnels where Luke hoped, prayed, there might still be a chance to survive. Luke's ribs screamed with every breath, blood soaking the bandage Willa had tied around his side. But he pushed forward, rifle clutched in white-knuckled grip. Willa half-supported him, her pulse rifle slung over one shoulder, her eyes sharp, her lips pressed in grim determination. They weren't running anymore. They were fighting towards something. The tunnels loomed ahead, mouths of blackness carved into the rock. The air smelled of rust and ash. Luke stumbled, catching himself against the stone wall. Willa turned, pressing close, her hand steadying his chest. You can't keep going like this. You'll bleed out. Luke gave a crooked smile, teeth red. Ain't the first time I've bled on the trail. Won't be the last. Her glare softened. She touched his face with trembling fingers. Don't you dare die on me, Thatcher. Not after everything. Before he could answer, the ground shook. The Xeroth were closing fast, their claws scraped against stone, a chorus of hunger. Willa pulled him inside the tunnel. Darkness swallowed them, the air damp and cold. She found an old lantern, its faint blue glow flickering to life. The tunnel stretched deep into the mountain, long abandoned. Machinery lay rusting in the dark. silent reminders of men who had once dug for ore but were now dust. As they pressed deeper, Luke noticed something, markings etched into the stone. Not human. Symbols, glowing faintly with the same violet as the Zeroth warp light. Willa ran her hand across them, her breath hitching. These aren't just mines. This was one of their nests. Before Luke could reply, a voice echoed from the dark. You've stepped into the grave of humanity, Thatcher. From the shadows emerged a figure unlike any they had seen yet, taller than any Zeroth, and its carapace plated in crystalline armor, its multiple eyes burning with intelligence. But what froze Willa wasn't the alien itself. It was the human skulls braided into its armor. The creature's voice was like broken glass. I am the Prime Executor. The war ends here. Your kind kneels, or your species dies. Luke raised his rifle. Funny. Last time someone said that, I put a bullet in his head. The Executor hissed, a sound that shook the stones. Zeroth soldiers poured into the tunnels behind it, filling the air with their claws and chittering cries. Luke and Willa stood back to back, their weapons hot, their bodies pressed close in the narrow passage. This is it, Luke muttered. Willa smiled grimly, her eyes wild with fire. Then let's make it count. They opened fire. The tunnels lit with chaos. Pulse bolts seared through alien flesh. Luke's repeater spat round after round until the barrel smoked. Willa fought like she had been born for this moment, rolling, striking, firing, every motion fueled by fury and desire to live free. Blood sprayed, bodies fell. Still the Zeroth came. The Executor advanced, absorbing fire with its crystalline plates. One blow of its claw shattered Luke's rifle. Another strike hurled Willa against the wall, her pulse rifle skittering into the dark. Pain tore through her body, but she forced herself to stand. She grabbed a rusted mining pick from the ground, holding it like a spear. The Executor laughed, the sound alien and cruel. You are nothing. A woman sold for scraps, a man without a land, and yet you defy us? Willa's voice cracked like thunder. Because we're human, and we don't break. She hurled the pick. It struck the alien's chest, cracking the crystalline plate. The Executor staggered, roaring. Luke, bleeding and half-conscious, lunged forward with the broken rifle, jamming it into the crack and pulling the trigger. The weapon exploded point blank. The blast tore through the Executor's chest. Alien ichor sprayed across the tunnel, its scream echoing like thunder. The Prime collapsed, its armored body twitching, then fell still. The Zeroth froze, their hive mind fractured. Without their leader, confusion rippled through the ranks. Some shrieked, retreating. Others turned on each other, tearing themselves apart. Luke fell to his knees, coughing blood. Willa dropped beside him, clutching his face in both hands. Stay with me, please. You did it. You killed their leader. We can win now. His eyes fluttered open. He smirked weakly. Told you? I ain't dying yet. She laughed through tears, pressing her forehead against his. Around them, the tunnels rumbled as the alien hive collapsed. Rocks fell, dust choked the air. They staggered to their feet, dragging each other forward, until at last the tunnel burst open into the night. Outside, the battlefield had changed. The Zeroth ships faltered in the sky, their formations breaking. Human defenders, bloodied but unbowed, pushed forward with renewed fury. The traitor's army was shattered. The dawn broke, pale light spilling across the smoking land. Luke and Willa stood together on the ridge, battered, burned, but alive. For the first time, the sky above was theirs again. Willa turned to him, her hand finding his. So, what now, cowboy? Luke looked out at the battlefield, at the broken chains of alien and human alike. His thumb brushed her knuckles, rough and gentle all at once. Now, we rebuild, we fight for what's ours, and we make damn sure no one ever owns us again. She leaned into him, her lips finding his in a kiss that tasted of blood, ash, and victory. Around them, the fires burned low. The world was scarred, but it was theirs. and together they walked forward, not as prisoner and rescuer, but as partners forged in fire. Bound by lust, love, and the unbreakable will to live free. The last ember of men still burned, and it was enough to light the stars. The end.